Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Haribol. So the topic we're going to talk about tonight is a continuation of what we've been discussing on the theme of ethics, morals, and spirituality. And if you recall, we took a quick look on the topic. I was asked about the legalization of cannabis and also the other referendum question in relation to euthanasia. And the conclusion I tried to establish was that for a society to function well and for an individual to live a good life, there has to be some sort of ethical or moral principles that we are following. And everybody does that. The problem lies in when people start making it up. Meaning that on the basis of some fanciful idea that appeals to me, on the basis of a dictate of my mind, I begin to try and establish something as being good or something has been bad. In discussing that, we came to the third topic, which was the actual need for a higher authority. And we talked about the establishment or about spiritual authority being a higher authority. And the foundation for this authority, a foundation for the guidance on what is moral or what is ethical, has to be founded on the higher understanding that we are all spiritual beings, that this bodies that we're inhabiting is not actually us. This is a temporary position that we are in. That death of this body is absolutely certain. And if we have this foundational understanding, there will be a tendency to then consider the idea of morals or ethics in relation to my eternal well-being and the well-being of all others. So I've still got a couple of questions that came in about the topics, and the subject tonight is a continuation of that idea, having talked about the idea of the need for a higher and more spiritual authority. So it's fundamentally, they summarize things with asking whether there was a connection between spiritual knowledge and truth. So this is what I received, and you'll probably find it a little bit intriguing, maybe. A lot of people think that no one can know the whole truth, and therefore we cannot receive the truth from another person. They conclude that we are all just fallible creatures, and therefore I'm on my own, and that it's up to me to find my own way and to muddle through. And so you see this idea played out when people talk about my truth. So then out of that came a question. Can another human being truly be a fully self-realized soul? And if so, how can we tell who is an authentic spiritual teacher, and how can we learn to have faith, in quotes, or trust in that person as our spiritual guide? Is this an interesting question? I was kind of quite surprised to receive this question, because it takes things now to actually a more essential level. So a lot of this, when people talk about truth, we understand from Vedic authority that there is relative truth and there is absolute truth. We have a big movement in the world coming out of, the humanist movement, becoming more prevalent in the 70s, 80s, and growing in importance, where they say there is no absolute truth. For me, that is actually not a very intelligent statement. You know why? Because if you make a rule that there is no absolute truth, you are saying that is absolute. And so by saying there is no absolute truth, you're contradicting your own statement. And it means your statement is untrue. That's like, well, what? You're just going around in a circle. And you'll generally find, unfortunately, that, this culture or idea of I can have my own truth is really born out of self-centeredness. We live in a time when the world is very much affected and influenced by more selfish philosophies and ideologies. The word selfie, the fact that that's just so normal, and to take a selfie is no big deal. Whereas 10 years ago, if you kept asking somebody, you handed them your camera and said, can you take a picture of me? And then another one of me, and another one of me here. And did it look okay? Can you get another one of me? And then somebody else comes on, oh, could you take a picture of me? And, if I did that, people would think that there's something wrong with you. But when we do it ourselves, that's become perfectly normal and okay. But it's the same thing. So we do accept, in all of the Vedic and yogic teachings, is very much premised on the idea that there is a higher and an absolute truth that is true for everyone. Whether you accept it or don't accept it, that's a different story. Everybody's free to do whatever they want. But for us to develop spiritually, and for us to actually become self-realized, there is both a need to accept that there is absolute truth and that it can be imparted, meaning somebody can possess that. This is now a little bit tricky for a lot of people. We understand in the yogic system that a person can attain perfection. there is an understanding that the human condition means when you are occupying and pretty much completely attached to the identity of this body as being a human being, the human condition. I mean, the reality is you're not a human being. You're a spiritual being, temporarily occupying this human body. The uncovering and the revealing of my actual spiritual nature is what self-realization is about. And that is a potential, a capacity that everyone has. The process of spiritual life is uncovering that truth, uncovering that reality. Not only are there perfect spiritual teachers, each one of you can become, again, a perfect spiritual being. It's not like we actually become, it's like the covering gets ripped off. The covering, the ignorance that is covering us becomes removed. And so in yogic teachings, there are 3 ways in which a person can be established in perfection as a perfect spiritual being. The first is called, this word siddha. Siddha means somebody that has attained perfection. The first is called nitya siddha, meaning they are eternally perfect. These are a category of spiritual teachers that have come to this world only for the purpose of enlightening and trying to relieve others of their suffering. Then you have a category of what's called kripa siddha. The kripa siddha, it means a person that was able to regain their spiritual identity because of divine mercy, a great blessing. And then the third category is called sadhana siddha. Sadhana is your regular spiritual practice. Like we really try to encourage people to, take to the practice of meditation and to develop a personal and daily habit to build spiritual practices that transform and change you and enlighten you. So this category is people that started out possibly in a really bad place, like very ignorant, but as a result of following spiritual direction and adopting spiritual practice, they have come to the position of being fully self-realized. So these are the 3 ways. The question was, does anybody have a question about any of this before I go any further? The fact that we accept there is an absolute truth. There is an absolute reality. And it is possible for every single person to experience that because it's part of our eternal nature. Nobody is exempt from that possibility. And that the way in which a person can progress is by the association, the very holy association and direction of those who are in that state of perfection, of self-realization. And that it is in fact necessary and essential to build such a connection or relationship, to become successful in your spiritual endeavor. So I'll just read the question. Can another human being truly be a self-realized soul? And the answer is yes. And it's not like a few special people. Every single one of you has this capacity. And if so, if a human being can become fully self-realized, how can you tell who is an authentic spiritual teacher? And how can we learn to trust or have faith in that person as a spiritual guide? Okay, this is a little bit, this is a really serious question. One of the things that really struck me when I came into contact with this ancient system of knowledge, when I was still a young dude, one of the essential parts of it was that in order to succeed in spiritual life, you need to question. You have to question everything. And that completely blew my mind, because I was raised as a Roman Catholic, and I was told that you just had to believe, and if something was too difficult, the question, and people couldn't answer it, they would just say, "That is a mystery, my son." Well, just because it's a mystery for you, it doesn't mean it has to be a mystery for everybody. But you should just shut up and get on with it and have faith, and everything will work out okay in the end. Well, that's a distinct possibility if you are actually on the right path. If you're getting the perfect guidance, yeah, that is a possibility. But here the question is, well, who should I actually follow? If there is spiritual authority, how can I recognize that spiritual authority? And how am I able to come to trust that? So these things are critically important. So there are enormous amount of information in the Vedas pertaining to how to form a judgment. What would be the characteristics of someone that is actually a self-realized spiritual teacher? What are the things I can look at and make some judgment upon? Accepting that, yeah, I'm not totally enlightened. There may be some flaws in my judgment, but there's got to be some starting point. The first and foremost requirement of a spiritual teacher is to have a spiritual teacher. And it's astonishing how many people are willing to put forth teachings and ideas, but themselves have never been a dedicated and surrendered servant of a great teacher. So anytime that you see somebody does not have not only a teacher, but an unbroken line of spiritual teachers that go back to the very establishment of these great spiritual teachings. This system, in Sanskrit, this is called sampradaya. Sampradaya. It means your spiritual lineage. And they must be individuals of not just sterling character, but individuals who are actually self-realized. And it's so evident when you look at their teachings, when you look at their life, and you compare it to what is advised in the Vedas, that should be the minimum standards for these things. So these two things, you must have a spiritual teacher, and that spiritual teacher must be part of a faultless lineage. Not just that somebody can just make something up. I mean, it's too common to have people that say, oh, that they were one day, that they were just had this spiritual experience. They became realized, and now they're here to share everything with you. That, I would be extremely concerned about anybody that makes such a statement, because that's not the way it works. In the Bhagavad Gita, there are two parts of the Bhagavad Gita that give some definition of the characteristics of such teachers. So I will read a list of some of these characteristics. First one is one who is not envious. And for me, I didn't get this in the beginning. It took me quite a long time to understand the role that envy plays, to look at others with any sense of jealousy or desiring what they have or wishing them ill or, whatever. One who is not envious but is a kind friend to all living entities. This is extraordinary. Someone that does not see anyone as an enemy, even those who may declare themselves to be an enemy of that person. They do not see anyone as an enemy. They are a kind friend to all, not just human beings, all living entities. Who does not think themselves a proprietor. They are not laying claim to anything. Even the body that they are using, they are not laying claim to it in the sense that I can do whatever I want with it. It's mine. What to speak then of possessions, or in relationships, other people we want to claim as ours? This is the normal way that people function and the normal way that things go on. Next quality, a person who is free from false ego. Now, in Sanskrit, there is this word ahankara, and it is translated in English by great spiritual teachers as false ego. We have this concept in psychology of ego that's a little bit distorted, actually, when we want to examine the true spiritual reality. It's much closer to the Greek term and how the Greeks used the word. The ego was the sense of self, that I exist. I am real, I exist. The false ego is when I tie that identity to anything that is temporary. If I tie my concept of self to being male or female or anything in between, if I tie myself to the idea of being of a racial group or an ethnic extraction, if I tie myself to any national identity, even if I tie myself to a human identity, which is actually better than all those other things we mentioned because it's just way much broader and it's really pointing a person towards something that is more spiritual. But a true transcendentalist holds no false conception of the self. They fully experience and realize their actual spiritual identity. Such a person is equal in both happiness and distress. What? So this description here relates to the material experience. Living in this world, having a body, you will frequently experience both what's called happiness, which we know is not true and deep eternal happiness, it's a temporary experience, and distress or great unhappiness. When a person is equal in the face of both of those experiences, they're not pulled one way or the other. They see it as being something that is just passing by. A person who is tolerant. This is a huge thing in spiritual life, to develop tolerance. And it requires becoming more fixed in the experience of yourself as a spiritual being. And because of that, you can put up with difficulty and unhappiness. There is one definition in Sanskrit of tolerance. It means to patiently endure unhappiness. That's far out. Even if you find yourself in the most deplorable situation, you are going through a period in your life where there is great unhappiness, which will always be connected to choices that you made and decisions that you made. But now that I'm in that state of experiencing great distress, that should not be driving me and driving my decisions. I need to be making good spiritual decisions every day, every moment, that bring me closer to the experience of the full self-realization, full enlightenment. Such a person is always satisfied. That's just like almost unimaginable, because we live in a state of being dissatisfied. A momentary blast of happiness, or watching a movie, or eating something, or hanging out. Somebody made a joke, and we can momentarily forget the fact that we are actually always dissatisfied. It will not be until you, the spiritual being, are constantly immersed in spiritual experience, tasting spiritual food, experiencing spiritual love, that you will become satisfied. Until that time, you will not be satisfied. Another characteristic is that one should be always self-controlled. My mind is not dictating what I'm going to do or how I'm going to react or how I'm going to behave. It's not my emotions. I'm always making these very clear spiritual decisions because I'm deeply absorbed in this experience. Such a person will always be engaged in a mood of great devotion to the highest truth. And such a person's mind and intelligence, Krishna says, will be always fixed on me, meaning always fixed in that which is transcendental. That is a short list. But these are the characteristics. I mean, my experience when I was young, I started trying to practice, Ashtanga yoga, and I was on my own, and I'm reading all these weird books, and I'm trying to do different things, and I'm having some really amazing experiences, Kundalini related, and it was just so many incredible things. But then I was also experiencing a great deal of anxiety and fearfulness. Where's this all going? And I recognize I need help. I need to find somebody that can help me walk this path. And so, being all innocent and, I'd hear about some heavy dude up in Auckland or in Hamilton or Wellington or wherever, and I would just hit the road. As soon as I'd hear about some heavy person, I want to go check them out. And I would approach them with great submissiveness and want to hear. And usually within 2 hours or sometimes 2 days or 2 weeks, I would come to this realization, shit, they don't know what they're talking about. They're making stuff up. Or they're just repeating things that they've read in books. Because I was having my own internal experiences. And I'm going like, no, it's not like that. And you could, you come to realize it. And it led me to this unfortunate condition where I thought nobody knows the truth. Everybody's winging it. And I thought I should become a monk, and I was thinking of becoming a Trappist monk and just retire to their farm, ashram situation in Gisborne there, and maybe bring a few marijuana seeds with me to plant down the back of their farm. And perhaps if I had an ideal situation and I was doing my meditation and being prayerful, perhaps, somewhere in my life I will be mercifully blessed with some higher realization and understanding. But I didn't know because my experience is very limited. There are self-realized teachers. They're not common. There are self-realized teachers. And the importance of finding a person to help establish higher truth is of critical importance, and it cannot be based on whether they've got long hair or shaved head or whether they're wearing robes or whether they're naked or whether they got jeans on or whether they've got thousands of disciples. You can have thousands of people that got it wrong. Just think about Nazi Germany. Millions of people got it wrong. That's because it's part of the human condition to be subject to illusion, to make mistakes. So this is a spiritual reality, and in these great spiritual texts, it lays down what to look for and what kind of judgment you personally need to cultivate. But when one actually begins to follow very submissively a real spiritual teacher, your life becomes transformed. Okay? So that was my actually quite brief answer. This is a big subject. But you like it? Is it interesting or what? Yeah. It's actually of critical importance. Anybody that says there is no absolute truth, know instantly that they are idiots. Because they're just contradicting themselves. The reality is, we have this, we're driven by this deeper spiritual nature. If we can get past the mind and all the desires and bad habits and everything, we all have this goodness. We all have this deep spiritual truth within us. And finding someone to help us uncover that is actually the purpose of human life. Animals, they do 4 things, fundamental categories. They eat, they sleep, they mate, and then they defend themselves or what they consider theirs. If human beings are only doing this, or maybe we do it better, we don't just go out and choose something on the ground, we cook it. We may be vegan. We may be, preparing all kinds of nice, fancy things. But still, you're doing the same thing. Doesn't matter how you package it. You're still just eating. Whether you sleep on the ground or in a bed or in a luxury hotel, you're still fundamentally just sleeping. It doesn't get any better. Mating, right? The big sex drive. And then defending ourselves and that which we feel we own. If that's all we're doing, like with atomic bombs now instead of with our teeth and nails, that doesn't make you more advanced. You're just a better animal. Human beings have one capacity that is different than all other life forms. You can ask the question, who am I? What's this all about? What should I be doing? Where can I find the truth and fulfillment I seek? That is the purpose of human life and what sets human beings apart. If you're not doing that, you're simply a polished animal. I don't mean that as a criticism, but it's important to recognize. Because if you don't recognize it, then you're just going to stay in that position. Anybody have a question? So that was pretty direct, right? But it's good. Thank you very much.
Nitai Gaura
Haribo.